Hi, it's Dwyer. It's November 5th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me also add, to help pay some bills, gold and silver are near all-time highs. I've tagged some offerings which are available for purchase. Now let's talk about a prospect, but let's first give context, right? There's an opportunity. Now granted, it's going to take some effort, but there's an opportunity at 175 pounds, a loaded division. I'm going to name some names here, right? We'll start with the three Bs: Bivol, Beterbiev, Benavides. Right, you also have Callum Smith, Joshua Buatsi, Anthony Yard, Zach Parker, Grovesdick, and Lyndon Arthur. Now, folks, think about how big the opportunity is. Of all the guys I just named, and if you count them, there are 9 names. Only one of those guys, David Benavides, is under 30. Right? Let's keep in mind that boxing is a young man's game. When you see a loaded division like this, but a lot of the guys are older, I'm telling you, sooner or later, Father Time is gonna dim your reflexes. Right? Father Time is gonna make your ability to cut weight more difficult. Right? Father Time might take some of the air out of your lungs in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds. Right? It might hurt your stamina. So I believe a young lion has an opportunity to beat some of these established, great resumes, but older fighters. Right? Some of these guys, folks, are in their late 30s. Right? Older fighters in a glorious 175-pound weight class. And if that young lion is good enough, he has a long runway ahead of him because there are a lot of names here. Right? Now you have a guy, and folks, it's hard to find better highlights than the highlights for this guy. In my favorites folder right now, you have highlights of two-time amateur U.S. champion Najee Lopez. Right? This is a favorite on ProBox. He has an extensive amateur pedigree. He's unbeaten as I make this video. He's 26 years old. He has a great straight right hand. He has great timing. In other words, this is the elite counterpuncher. Right? He can get close to you. He throws short punches, or rather, he can shorten his punches. He throws a lot of hooks, but he can shorten his punches. He's precise. He knows how to wait you out. In other words, you have your defense up. There's nothing to hit. He's hanging around. You start to throw a punch. This is the young guy with hand speed, with power, who is patient enough to wait for you to start to throw. And if he picks right, let's say he's all queued up, you start to throw a left hand, he's the right-handed guy who can lead with a withering straight right hand that he can throw as a lead or as a counter. Right? He'll wait to counter you. This is a guy who also can fight downhill. By that I mean, just like they say a running back can run downhill, if this guy builds up a head of steam, if he is, beating you to the punch, and he's landing big punches, and he has you cornered, once he gets an inch on you, he can turn it into a yard. Right? He's the guy who can stay in front of you and start to unload. And if he hurts you, he's not bashful. He'll try to end the fight. He'll stay there. He'll throw big shots. Right? Think Fabio Wardley in the last round against Joe Parker, the round in which they stopped the fight. Right? Fabio Wardley felt that he had Parker at a disadvantage. He wasn't bashful. Right? He was ready to empty the tank. Right? He threw enough punches where, the referee saw Parker not throwing punches back, saw Wardley throwing a lot of punches, and stopped the fight. We can debate whether it was a good stoppage. What we can't debate is the effort Wardley put in the moments before the stoppage. But folks, when we mention a young guy with promise, and this guy has a lot of promise, right? He's from Georgia. He has a lot of promise. Many people are commenting on him, right? He looks like he could be the future. Let's be critical here, because it's in the margin where you make money. In other words, it's where you see things the public might not fully appreciate. Now, I believe that Najee Lopez, and again, this guy right now is in the stage of his career where he looks unbeatable, right? You see him, athlete, hand speed, knows how to move around the pocket, right? In other words, he'll be in front of you, then he'll take a little sidestep. The angles are different. A hurt fighter, a hurt opponent might not realize that, right? But folks, it's what you don't see that matters. This guy needs to study Usyk. One of the big things with Usyk is that opponents can't find him in the ring. Right? Just understand he's fighting Tony Bellew. That's an important fight. And there's a moment in that fight, and that fight's in Bellew's backyard. There's a moment in that fight where Tony, who came to fight, right? It's not like Tony's afraid of Usyk. No, Tony's there for a dust-up, right? Tony came to fight. But there's a part in that fight where Tony's so frustrated by Usyk moving around the ring, right? Showing a back foot, moving around, that Tony actually yells at Usyk, waves his hands, tells Alexander Usyk, this is when Usyk was lesser known, to come fight him. Right, folks? That's the part of Najee Lopez's game that's missing. Right? Understand how important that part of his game is. Usyk's fighting Fury. Right? First fight. Right? Fury is the consensus champion. Right? Whatever the sanctioning bodies are doing, we saw Fury in a spirited series of matches against Deontay Wilder. Right? Fury was the consensus champion. Fury was the person with what I call possession for that first Usyk fight. And you notice, Fury, who's not a fried potato. In other words, Fury can move. He's not a potted plant in the ring. But you notice there was a movement gap in that fight, right? Usyk, athlete. Usyk could move backward, be just far enough away from Fury, where Fury would have to actually take steps toward him. Right? That athletic gap actually defines the matchups between the two guys. Usyk moves just a little bit better than Fury does. Right? Usyk, against a bigger man, doesn't have to stand in the pocket and be blood and guts. There's a movement part to his game. If you're going to fight Usyk, you have to be prepared to move. That's not to say Usyk doesn't have in the pocket skills. It's just that he has different gears that he can go to. Right? So you notice a coordination gap in Usyk fights. Right? Against Daniel Dubois, folks, Usyk looks like he's on figure skates against Daniel Dubois. Usyk moves that much better than Dubois. Right? Dubois looks like he has heavy feet against Usyk. You didn't notice that in the Dubois-AJ fight. You notice it in the Usyk fight. Now, Najee Lopez, with a runway ahead of him, think about the paydays. Right? He could literally fight several guys at 175, build up his bank account before he even gets to David Benavidez, the guy who's within 2 years of him. Right? You know, here's the problem. I don't see the back foot. He moves well around the pocket, but I don't see the part of his game where a Tony Bellew would start demanding that he come fight him. Right? You know Najee Lopez is there to trade punches. You know that. In fact, you know that a little bit too well, don't you? Right? Let me say too, Usyk, because of his movement, he doesn't need a pocket. Right? He can beat the daylights out of you with a pocket. Right? Isn't that what he did with Daniel Dubois the second fight? But Usyk can move enough where there isn't a pocket. Najee Lopez, his team, they need to think about that. Right? In other words, let's remember Mr. Rope-a-dope, the guy who rope-a-doped, Ali, right, used to be a great mover. You know, you can know how to rope-a-dope in the pocket and at the same time be able to be too fluid outside of the pocket. Najee Lopez is an A-level prospect. A-level. Right? But if he's in the ring with a Tony Bellew, and we're blurring weight classes here, we're just focusing on styles. If he's in the ring with a Tony Bellew, he shouldn't have to be in the pocket. He shouldn't have to be blood and guts. Right? Understand, when you're dealing with some of the older guys who are here at 175, right? You understand you don't want to be in the pocket with Arthur Beterbiev. You have to have a way to fight Beterbiev where you are moving around the ring. You're forcing him to lift his feet. I thought the fight, I forget the guy's name, Marcus, Beterbiev fought a guy, Marcus something. And I thought his movement bothered Beterbiev. Right? It's not just the Bivol fights where Beterbiev was bothered by movement. If I'm Najee Lopez, I need that option. Right? If I'm going to fight Anthony Yard, and I know Benavidez is going to go about it a different way, but if I'm going to fight Anthony Yard, I need some movement. Right? Lopez has the jab. He needs to figure out how to use it. Like Kovalev did against Anthony Yard. Right? Where even a slugger like Kovalev didn't stand in front of Yard and trade. No, he threw a jab and then moved. I believe Najee Lopez needs to develop that skill set. So in my favorites folder, and it's a pretty comprehensive series of highlights. Right? I give the YouTuber who put together that video a lot of credit. Right? You'll notice that there's a fight where, and I'm not even talking about the fight where Najee Lopez gets knocked down. I'm talking about the fight where Najee Lopez gets swollen. Right? Guy hits him in the head enough where you notice Najee Harris's eyes swollen and stuff like that. Folks, you never see an Usyk, and Usyk's in his late 30s himself, with a face that's swollen like that. Because Usyk knows how to slow the action down with movement. How to be not only hard to hit, but hard to find. To me, That's the skill set that right now isn't fine-tuned with Najee Lopez. Right? If Najee Lopez fought Arthur Beterbiev, there's about a 10-year or so gap between the two guys. Right? Najee Lopez, in fact, it's more than 10 years. Najee Lopez wouldn't be able to maximize his youth. Right? This is the athlete who has gotten by blowing guys out of the pocket. Right? He hasn't had to go to plan B. Right? This is the problem with being a young boxer. Right? You haven't had to go to plan B. You haven't had to go to plan C. Right? This guy has been able to walk in the ring and blow out opponents, get stoppages. Right? He has a healthy knockout percentage. He needs to realize, hey, I need to be hard to find when I'm fighting an Arthur Beterbiev. Right? One of the great things with Zach Parker, and I thought it was A+, right? This is a skill that's going to help him. Zach Parker's ability to clinch. You see it in the Buatsi fight. You need skills like that if you're going to be fighting hyper-aggressive guys like Benavidez, Beterbiev, right? Anthony Yard. You're going to need survival skills. You can't assume I'm alpha. I'll control the pocket. Right? Understand, great fighters like Usyk don't have those assumptions. Right? The idea has to be that I have different modes of attack. Right? That I can come in and be hard to find. Understand how that Bellew fight ends. Usyk steps in the pocket. Knocks out Tony Bellew. It's a vicious knockout. Right? Usyk has punching power. Usyk has pocket skills. But Usyk also has a zone where he can frustrate you by moving and feinting and not allowing you to find him. Right? You see him, you take a step forward to engage, he takes a step backward. Najee Lopez with the big punch, with the great straight right hand, with the counterpunching skills. Right? He needs to figure out how to be harder to find. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. Remember the name. Right? When you see a talent like this, and you see a loaded division, as 175 is, with older guys, right? You realize it's just a matter of time before Najee Lopez gets his opportunity. Right? A fighter can't wait till the night of the fight, to be in the ring with an Arthur Beterbiev, and then to realize, man, I should have learned how to clinch a little bit better in sparring. Right? Gee, I wish I had a back foot that I could use and still win rounds and not look like I'm running. Right? A fighter can't wait for the night of the fight to have those thoughts. He has to develop those skills so in the moment when he's dazed and confused, he has muscle memory. Right? Beterbiev's throwing a, vicious left hook. Let me lean back and have the punch swing in front of me. Right? I'm backing up. I look. I realize I'm close to the corner. I got Arthur Beterbiev bearing down on me. Let me take a step forward. Let me clinch him. I know how to do that. Right? Let me clinch him in a way where he can't hit me. Right? Where I'm not at risk of him being slick. Right? A Golovkin type. And having an arm pushing off my body and throwing punches as I'm trying to clinch him. Right? Lopez needs that can't find me part of his game better developed. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.